get started. I'm going to put this on mute, and we'll save all, and we'll have questions at the end. So if you'll just keep them all till then.
The conference is now in silent mode.
We'll back up one. So welcome. Dr. Barry Rose is going to give us some information on VAE and meaningful use, and I'll let him start our webinar.
Great. Thank you, Mindy. My name is Barry Rhodes. I'm the development team lead for NHSN, overall technical lead. Two brief topics I wanted to bring to your attention. I think I've spoken about this before. But we're now ready to move into a beta for the ventilator-associated event synthetic data set. So what this is a patient data set seeded with ventilator-associated conditions and infection-related ventilator-associated complications, IVACs. So these are the two of the three tiers that comprise the VAE protocol. So the patient data set is completely de-identified and synthetic. We've seeded the data set with various permutations and combinations of VACs and IVACs. And we've also provided basically the answers, if you will, a data set that explains the results for each of the various conditions. They're both in XML format. What you would need to do is download the data sets, and right now, because we're in early beta, what I'd ask you to do is simply send a request to the CDA mailbox, as you normally do, asking for the synthetic. We'll provide that to you in 2 files. So what you would do with the data set is import it into your application, run your own locally instantiated versions of our protocols, get the results, compare those results to the known data, to the actual result data set that we provide, and that way you can check to ensure that you've coded the definitions correctly. It is an early beta. There are probably still errors to be found. If something doesn't make sense to you, just drop us an email and we'll take a look at it. It's either an error on our part that we have gone up pretty well, or possibly some misunderstanding. So do communicate with us. Let us know if you're using it, how you're using it, and we'd be open to hearing recommendations about making it better, extending it on out. So that's the synthetic data set. Oh, I will say that eventually this data set, when we feel it's ready for prime time, we will put it on the NHSN CDA website, and you'll be able to just download it directly from there. But until then, just send us an email and we'll get it to you. The next slide is really a very exciting piece of information. I think many of you are aware that last month the White House announced a new national strategy for combating antibiotic-resistant bacteria called CARB. And the upshot of that is that in meaningful use stage 3, we expect AU and AR reporting to be a part of that. And that would be AU and AR reporting into NHSN using the clinical document architecture implementation guides that you should now already have. So nothing new here from your perspective other than the fact that this will be a part of meaningful use stage 3, we hope. That's the plan anyway. There's a lot of details to be worked out. We don't know quite how this is going to play with respect to other public health reporting. requirements and meaningful use, those are details to be ironed out. But right now we're very excited and think that this will really move the initiative forward pretty dramatically for NHSN. There's a link at the bottom of the page to the national strategy, which you can take a look at in your free time. So we'll be happy to take questions later on at the end if you have any about this or the VAE data set. Pretty much takes care of me. Mindy, you want to take it back over?
Yeah, I will say the CARB National Strategy PDF that's listed there, I will send out after our webinar along with the slide set. So be looking for that document. This is just a general update. I have this question probably more often than I should. It's talking about the user rights to import CDAs. And it's generally when you have new users at your facility, you know, IPs that are want to import the CDAs. So I'm really, you as the vendor, if you could just pass it along to your help desk folks. So the user to import all CDA types needs to have administrator and all rights, which is different than the administrative person for the site. So just make sure you pass that along. Often they just end up with AUR rights, and they can import like BSIs, clips, and so on. So please pass this along to your help desk. So now we'll talk about NHSN Release 8.3. So it's scheduled for late January 2015. A high-level list of changes are we're going to have updates for the following CDAs, SSI procedures, UTI, dialysis, and antimicrobial use. There will be an increased validation of your SSI procedure linkage, a 14-day rule for BSI and UTI events, addition of Cree Enterobacter, pathogen and susceptibility update. And then we'll also talk about the CDA PreProduction vendor test site, how it's coming along. The updated CDAs will be based on the R2D1.1. I'm sure you already have downloaded this from the HL7 website. If not, this is the information and the link and just guidance on where to find it. Sometimes it's hard to find a specific IG there, but this should help you. There is one addition to the R2D1.1 IG update to your CDAs. To give you a little background, after we went normative, when the R1 norm, which is what the animal control resistant is based out of, due to HL7 rules, our HAI template ID needs to remain the same. Well, for us and for you, we sort of lost our versioning of it. So once we got into our development and realized what had happened, we requested that Lantana help us figure out this issue, and so they have added a conformant to HAA IG, think of it as the IG template ID to help us identify the version. So it's highlighted there in yellow. We're just now getting it settled. It's Lantana's testing it. Our developers are testing it. It's looking good. I will distribute Lantana's updated schema files and the sample CDAs to you. Hopefully it should be in the next few days. So this will only apply to your updated SSI procedures, UTI, and dialysis CDAs that you are creating now. And also I wanted to make sure you notice in the sample, the original sample SSI CDA, the procedure details was missing. So it's supposed to be there like it always has been there, so just make sure you were aware of that. Just a reminder to use the Lantana CDA validator when you're first creating your files. You know, it really should validate there before you start importing it into NHSN as your next test. So make sure when you're doing it, you click on the highlighted yellow there that says R2D1.1 to make sure that's the sample, the version that you're validating. So now we're getting to the actual changes. As you noticed, many of you got the newsletter today. I have not sent it out from our NHSN distribution list yet, but I think most of you probably have already gotten it. There are a lot of changes, a lot of protocol changes. Some of them were late breaking for us due to CMS requirements, HHS, and so on. And as we walk through these slide sets, you're going to see an example of that lab ID. Changes were late, so therefore we did not they're not in the CDA, so that CDA is going to lag behind a little, and we'll implement the lab ID, new CDA, in 2016. So we're really trying to stay ahead. You know, as for CDA, we need to stay about a year and a half to 2 ahead, and it's really hard sometimes, and it's out of our control. So just a little background there. So for CR 929 and also 1086, these are the SSI changes. Have to create the new CDA based on the R2D1.1 IG. Has an additional question. Is the SSI present at time of surgery? And there's the code. Also in red, back a year and a half ago when we submitted this to, be in the IG and go through ballot, they had thought we needed this question, but now the protocol changed. They decided not to use it. However, it still has to be in the CDA due to the schema or it will fail. So you just need to have an answer in there. You need to have it in the CDA, have an answer, but nothing will be written to a database. And also there was a business rule change. A specific event type, lung, was added for the VSHN procedure. So next, CR 1109, procedure changes, also based on the R2D1.1 CDA. And both the SSI and procedures are based on your procedure date. So if your procedure date equals January the 1st, 2015 and greater, then you will be required to use the newer version of the CDA. Additional question has been added if total or partial revision was the revision associated with prior infection at index joint. And your possible answers are yes and no. It identifies revision arthroplasties that are associated with prior infection at the index joint. It is required to be included in the CDA for H-Pro and K-Pro procedures that are total or partial revision. You probably noticed in the CDA Impact Notes, I added a tab that has the codes that this affects. So please refer to that if you have any questions. So the SSI and procedure linking are being increased or enhanced. Before, the fields required for linkage were all of the ones listed, including patient ID and outpatient field. The patient ID presently just gives you a warning. Well, that is changing. Now they have to match. So make sure that you have them matching in your SSI procedure. I primarily see this problem with facilities that are doing CSV file imports for their procedures and then CDA for their SSI. And it's often just a matter of leading and trailing zeros. Well, those are different patient IDs, so you'll need to work with your hospital IT staff if they are sending CSV files in and make sure you're using the same patient IDs. So a few dialysis changes. So also a new CDA based on the R2D1.1 CDA, and this is based on the event date. So starting with any event dates that start in January, you'll need to send in the CDA that is based on the newer IG. As an additional required question, loss of vascular access, and your answers are yes, no, or unknown. And also, in addition to the criteria diagnosis observation, urinary tract infection, and there's the code. So not too many changes there. The UTI changes, you probably saw in the newsletter. If you read that, there's a lot of protocol changes. Besides it being a new CDA based on the R2D 1.1, I think the biggest thing is the protocol changes. So you're really going to need to dig in and see how that affects the data that you're collecting that you're submitting for, in your CDA. There were many specific criteria changes. Some we actually added a while back, and then the protocol got changed, and we've taken those away. I believe I sent out the paper form and had those scratched through that are no longer valid. So if you just want to take a quick look at your paper form, I think what I call it tweaked or commented, something like that. With this newer CDA, we're adding in the optional fields. These are actually the same optional fields that a BSI uses. So if you're already doing optional fields, you probably already have the coding for that. So more changes for the UTI. So urinary system infection is replacing ALDI. The CDA code will remain the same. So it's really more of a description change, not a real meaning change. So we're able to keep the code. So you'll see in the IDM on the specific event criteria BR, which stands for business rule, tab, there's the new rules for the USI. Also, a big change you want to make sure you check is the criteria was revised for SUDI and ABUDI. So also check that same tab, and you'll see all the changes. Actually, many were taken out, and then some were revised. They did add in the criteria to limit the pathogen list to pathogen 1, 2, and 3, and those noted as type B. I just have a screen print here to show you to make sure y'all understand. It's right here, and the B stands for bacteria. There's F for fungus, P for parasite, and so on. I have this in here also. In this area right here where the red is, if you do VAE or pneumonia, and I know those are not CDA, but I've included more information this time because I think many of you are already collecting that data for your users. So these are new columns for VAE pneumonia, so make sure that you see that. And then also column T that's grayed out, they took away the Europath column. So all those relate back to the for the UTI information. So Nexus CR 690, 14-day rule for BSI and UTI events, and actually it's other non-CDA events too, just in case you collect that data for your users. BSI or UTI events may not be reported on the same patient less than 15 days from the previous reported same event. So it's like comparing a BSI to a BSI or a UTI to a UTI. Regardless of the location, if the event is BSI or UTI and the event date is less than 15 days from previous event with the same patient ID, then an error will occur. So you'd get an error on import if you tried to do it before then. So here's your criteria. Event date is day 1, and then the event date, anything less than 15 days from previous same event date. Has to be the same patient ID and the same event type. Just as a FYI, this does affect other events that are not available in CDA, so refer to the protocol if you need more information. And things like pneumonia, bone and joint, central nervous system, and so on. There's actually many of them that this affects. this is an important protocol we just want to bring to your attention. Changing gap day to NHSN infection window. All elements of a specific infection criterion will be required to occur within a set time period known as an NHSN infection window. There was information in the newsletter, and I think more will be coming in the protocol, but just wanted to make sure that you were aware to read that. Some changes for pathogen susceptibilities, addition of nitropuritin as an optional drug. This is a big one for you guys also. The same pathogen is not allowed to be reported in an event. Report the organism once using the most resistant sensitivity of the organism collected that day. So, for example, before you were able to report 2 Staph aureus if just one of the antibiogram results was different, like ampicillin was sensitive and one was intermediate. You could report 2, say, Staph aureus. But now that it will not be true, you will just need to report the Staph aureus once in the event and use the most resistant antibiogram results. So 1163 is no change for CDA. So for the pathogens E. coli, Enterobacter, Klebsiella, and the drug results for cefepime are being modified to include S-CD. Valid results changing from SIRN to include S-CD. So whatever your laboratory can report, you can accommodate them in this situation. So the CDA report either one, and when viewed in the user interface, it will be viewed as I is intermediate. Unusual susceptibility profiles has been, an addition to it has been, is for the Cree definition added. So any coli, Klebsiella pneumonia, Klebsiella oxytoca, or Enterobacter testing resistant to imipenem, meropenem, thoripenen, or ertapenem. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on another slide. But just so you know, there's a new one's been added. So for those of you that are doing the animal microbial use CDA, there's been 4 drugs that have come on the market that will be added to your CDA. They are, you will still use your R6 CDA just as you have now. What we're trying to move toward is, since this is a dynamic value set, which is similar to, always changing, we were able to just update add these drugs in without actually changing the CDA. I know it's really, that's good for us to try to put that in more CDAs as we move forward. To give you time to include them, the additional drugs will be optional for less than equal to or 2015 data, and will become required starting for 2016 data. So that means even if you want to submit 2013 data, you can go back and still include these drugs in the older data. Same format used for each drug, that you would still have the number of days present, aggregate data, and the 4 routes of administration. So just basically think it's another drug that's added to your AU-CDA. So we're going to talk about the monthly report plan and how, and the multi-drug resistant organism module part of the monthly report plan. And I know it's not CDA, but you need to understand what's going on because you're going to need to collect the data on the backside. So I just wanted to, so we'll start here and we'll actually go through this one. We'll go through lab IDs, infections for surveillance, and we'll get to the POM. So it'll include everything. So there's no CDA import for monthly plan, but this will affect lab ID reporting. So for MDRO and CDI lab ID event reporting for facility-wide inpatient, will require location-specific surveillance for that same organism in each of the following location types: for emergency departments, pediatric and adult, and 24-hour observation locations. These facility map locations will be auto-populated in the monthly report plan. So that means in January, after we do the deployment, a script will be run. And so in this example, this user was following BACLAT in MRSA for lab ID blood specimens only. So that will, and then in their location mappings, they had emergency room. So emergency room will be auto-populated in their monthly plan for MRSA for lab ID blood specimens only. So you as the vendor, it will require you to gather that information also. So we've also had the addition of Cree Enterobacter. And the rule is all three Cree organisms will be grouped together. So if you follow one Cree, you're going to be required to follow all three Crees. And we're still, as you see, we're still in the monthly plan here. It's a screenshot. It may be followed for lab ID or for infection surveillance. At this time, Cree organisms are not required to be reported per CMS. Here's an example of the user interface. And you see in my messy, scratched-out mock-up, it'll look like Cree, and it'll have all three listed there beside it instead of being individually listed as it was before. So now we'll talk about Cree Enterobacter followed for infection surveillance. It affects BSI, SSI, and UTI events. Any Cree Enterobacter species that meets the Cree definition would need to be reported. And the Cree definition is right there, so it's all those organisms that test resistant to imipenem, meropenem, doripenem, and or ertapenem, a standard susceptibility test method. The primary change is it's changing from what's intermediate and resistant to only resistant and the addition of ertapenem. You can also report it based on production of a carbenopenase. Here's the example of infection surveillance checked in the MDRO section of the monthly plan. Right here, I think there's very few facilities that actually do infection surveillance anymore. But for those of you, for the facilities that do, then you will need to include this in your data collection for them. So now we'll talk about Lab ID. So continue to enforce the R5 Lab ID CDA. As I mentioned before, it's going to be updated in January 2016 using the, and it's called R2D2.1IG. The R5 Lab ID will not include Cree Enterobacter. So if your facility is wanting to report it, then it will need to be manually entered for 2015. Here's a business rule change that we already talked about. So here we are affecting your Lab ID. If the Lab ID specimen is collected in the facility's emergency department or 24-hour observation location on the same calendar day as inpatient admission, the Lab ID event will be assigned to that particular outpatient location. So that's a change for you that you can do now. The current 2014 rule will remain the same for specimens collected from any other affiliated outpatient locations. If collected on the same day, same calendar day as inpatient, assigned to admitting inpatient location. So it's just for the emergency department and 24-hour observation locations that you're going to assign it to that specific location. There's been, so as a FYI, there's 2 new optional questions added to the user interface. It will be in your 2016 Lab ID CDA, but it is remaining optional for now for 2015. And it is like as last physical overnight location of a patient, and also has the patient been discharged from the facility in the past 4 weeks. So that will remain optional this year because our CDA is not up to date, and then in 2016 it'll be required, but your CDA will have it in it then. Now we'll talk about the POM or the Lab ID summary report. You want to continue to import your R7 POM CDA. And once again, this CDA will move to an updated version for 2016. So here's a business rule change for those of you who are importing POM. You do have this field in your present R7 CDA. So the question is, if monitoring C. diff in a fact-wide location, then subtract NICU and well baby counts from total. That is changing, and it includes all counts from patient care units with separate CCNs like IRFs and IPS and so on. So you will need to adjust your count in your POM CDA that you're presently submitting for 2015. The next one is more of the FYI, additions to the user interface, but that are not in your CDA yet. So there's an additional question, if monitoring MDRO in a fact-wide location, then subtract all counts from patient care units with separate CCNs, IRFs, IPS, and so on from total. That is a new field in the user interface. It is not in your R7 POM. Because most facilities, it appears, have in their monthly plan that they're following fact-wide in. I think most of the time this POM summary report is going to go to the incomplete list. The user will need to manually complete the field for it to be completed. So just want to make sure that you know that. It will be, like I said, it will be added to the 2016 POM CDA. Also, will be added to the new Lab ID is the quarterly difficile test method. So that will also be added. And as I said earlier, sorry, the Lab ID changes came in so late. We didn't have our year and a half to get it in the implementation guide and go through ballot and so on. But it is going through there now, and it should be ready and to be implemented in 2016. It's just a recap for the CDA version imports. Your SSIs and your procedures are switching over to the R2D1.1. So if the procedure dates for both of those is 2014, you're going to need to submit your R9. If the procedure date is greater than or equal to 2015, then you'll need to submit the new CDA, the R2D1.1. And the same for the dialysis and UTI, but it goes by the event date, same rule, not the procedure date. More FYIs, just trying to keep y'all abreast of other things that are happening in the user interface. These have no CDA impact but are good to know. For summary reports, for manual entry of ICU other summary reports, a new protocol allows simplification method for counting device days has been added to the user interface. Because you're doing it electronically, we expect you to do it the full, complete way, so it's not an option for CDA. And then also a new field's been added for ICU other and SCA, total number of new episodes of mechanical ventilation. Chapter 17 has been revised. Please refer to the protocol. If you're reporting any of the non-big type events. And VAE and pneumonia had many protocol changes, and they are the CR numbers are 1160, 61, and 70 there as I've listed. So, as I said, I included VAE and pneumonia and a few other things because you need to know it. I think you're starting to use that data. You're collecting it for your users, even though it's not CDA. So, I have added it, and I added it in light green, not knowing what else to do it. I want you to just catch your attention. So here's an example of a screen print of the IDM, and you'll see these are for pneumonia, and they're lighter green. So that's what I was intending to show you. So as you go through in your CDA impact notes, you know I have listed the CR numbers. So make sure you can always do a find on them. Planned versions has the 8.3 here, and here's the CR numbers would be here. It doesn't show very well, but I think those are 1159 for UTI. So it's an easy way to, if you want to see all the changes. So it should match up to our webinar slides, our CDA impact notes. They should all go together, and you should be able to find the information in the IDM based on the CR numbers. So the CDA PreProduction vendor test site, it's coming along nicely. We are almost there, I would say. I think in the next maybe week, I'll send out the enrollment form to you. It's a very simple enrollment form to fill out, and I think as time goes, I think we'll be ready to import CDAs. And maybe by November the 7th is what I'm looking at. So no SAMs or SDN certificates required. It'll just be a link we'll give you. Like I say, I'll send out the form, and you'll send it back to the NHSN CDA mailbox. I did want to go over some of these rules of behavior, if we can read it. So do not enter any real patient data. The primary contact, I'll send it back to them, and that person can share it with their staff using that only one user ID and password. Multiple users can log in at the same time. Please don't share with your users at your facilities. This is just not meant for big mass production. Do not import large batches. It's just not built that way at this time. We're eventually going to move it to something more sturdier, but right now, this is what we have. I think I sent in 5 AUs in a zip file, and I shut it down. So this is for you to test your CDAs and not really batch production. And there'll be, and when you log in, there'll be that important message pop up. That should have information on what's valid, and also I'll send you emails, try to keep you abreast of what's valid and what's ready to be tested. It's actually going to mimic our development environment. So be patient, you know, with whatever I said is ready. If you do find problems, please let us know. But hopefully everything will be looking good by the time we tell y'all when it's ready to be tested. You can use the same OID as your test facility. You'll need to enter that yourself. And if you want to do production, continue to use your test facility in production for less than or equal to 2014 business rules. We work here in 4-week sprints, so it's not like I can keep throwing stuff out there. That's why I say we just put one over, a sprint over, so the next sprint will be over in, like toward the end of this month or early November, and I think at least the dialysis will be ready to be imported, and maybe procedures and a few of the others, but I'll keep you updated. This is real important in the yellow here. I want you to make sure you understand this. So so you can test your 2015 data. We roll back the clock in this environment. So anything that you're testing, if it has July the 1st and forward, it will pretend that it's 2015 and use the 2015 rules. Then once in real life, January 1st comes, that clock will automatically go off and be set to the correct. So just want to make sure you understand how you can test your 2015 data, like with these new CDAs. You would need to put event dates or procedure dates all of greater than July the 1st of 2014 for it to work correctly. So I'll keep you posted on this. I'll send out an email hopefully at the end of this week or next week with your enrollment form, and we can get everybody started on that. And this is for vendors only. It's not for users yet. Now we'll talk about future CDAs. So for next summer, we have outpatient procedures for ambulatory surgical care centers. The implementation guide's ready. There's been some possible protocol changes. So right now, decisions pending is what we'll say. We'll stay there for a while. I'll keep you posted if anything changes as we get closer to 2015. So scheduled for January 2016, so that means this time next year, we'll be moving all these CDAs to the newer version of IG, the R2D2.1. A lot of these you will see the summary reports, the lab ID, and the POM, or really we're just catching up with the user interface. The dialysis, I believe, will have the new blood question that's optional this year, and I think there's some new, few new clip questions coming on for 2015. So this time next year, we'll have a lot of CDAs to update. No immediate plans for VAE and biovigilance. Still waiting on the protocol to stabilize. So you all should have received the IDM. I sent it out last Friday along with CDM Tech Notes. Make sure you see the ones I sent out this past Friday had a few updates due to protocol changes. I'll send out the webinar slides and that CARB PDF, and also I'll send out the Lantana's updated schema and more information on that with the updated sample files for you to add that new template ID for the IG into your new CDAs. We always welcome feedback, and we offer individual vendor webinars. Just send an email to the CDA mailbox. I'm going to take the phones off mute, and we can have questions.
The conference is now in talk mode.
So go ahead. Does anyone have a question?
Mindy?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi. I submitted a question, but I'll go ahead and ask it. Page 8 of the NHSN September newsletter indicates that infection present at the time of surgery is actually a new field that will be required for 2015 and used for the SSI SIRS beginning in 2016. Can you clarify what you stated in one of the early slides, that this field will not be used for data? It's a placeholder only. That just seems to, I'm not sure if I understood that right.
The present at time of surgery, that question is required in the user interface, the protocol, and the CDA.
Okay, because I think one of your earlier slides said something about...
Right there. Yeah.
That in red. What do you mean by that, where it says it will... data will not be written to the database. Shouldn't it be?
So this is another, present at time of surgery is one question, and it will go to the database. And then the surveillance toolkit question was a second question.
Oh, I didn't understand that. Thank you for clarifying. Perfect.
And that's one that they took out of the protocol and will not be written to the database. Perfect.
Okay. And do you know when they'll have an updated CSV sample and instructions for procedure import?
Within a week or two, it should be posted.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
So early on, you said that that these changes are scheduled for late January. Does that mean our facilities shouldn't start tracking these changed items, like, for instance, the SSI present at the time of surgery, until that's released, or should they start tracking on January 1st?
Right. So this is Dawn. The release won't go out till late January, as you said, but the users are required to follow the protocols for any events that they identify as of January 1st. So they do need to follow beginning January, and that's why we have this meeting to present the information to all of you. We put the newsletter out today, as Mindy said, to give the users a heads up on all the details of the changes coming. There's going to be some trainings on little snippets, webinars that will be posted by topic, and those will be posted in late October, early November. Those will go up. So again, we're trying to prep them in advance so that they are ready to start following these new definitions as of January 1st. What we actually tell people, I guess, just to say this as well, is we actually tell the users, and it's written into the newsletter as well, that it's best to gather the data per the definitions and the protocols for January 1 and for the month of January, but to hold off on entering the data until after the release, because some of the data is going to end up being wiped because there's a big enough change that we can't keep those data in there, or they're not actually needed according to a new definition. Say something like UTI might not even use some of the criteria anymore. Things like surveys, we change them so much that we have to just delete what they put in and move them to incomplete and make them redo them. So we basically tell the users, don't enter your data super quickly in January, because by the end of the third week of January, the release will go out and then put data in. So we ask just to gather the data for the first few weeks and not put it in because of that.
Hello? I have a question regarding the lab ID. I understand that it won't be ready, updated till 2016. So for 2015, do we, when I look at the business rules in the newsletter that came out today, it looks like you'll do the total patient days and total admissions, which is similar today to the MRSA count. And then it looks like it's still going to ask for not only the subtraction of the patient care units with separate CCNs, but again, in addition to those, minus those NICU and well baby counts. So today we are collecting the total facility days and admissions for MRSA, and then we subtract to get the CDI days for that minus the NICU and well baby counts. Those fields look like they're still there, with the addition of another field that subtracts the separate CCNs. So for 2015, can we use the same import method, CDA, and one will feed the total facility days, one will feed the one without, and then we just manually put in the separate accounts for the CCNs? How do we do that?
Right. So you will continue to put your total counts in, as you just said, because those fields you're used to filling. And the CDIF field is the one you've been filling, but you're going to have to subtract the IRF and the IPF, CCN, any of those units that you have, those counts have to come out along with the removal of the baby counts. So that is calculated different, but it's the same variable fields you've been completing. It's just a one more step calculation before you fill those data. And then it'll go to the incomplete, and the MRSA will be the one that's manually completed, because that is taking your total count and subtracting the units, specifically the units of IRF and IPF that have different CCNs. Those counts come out, and then you're left with that new MDRO count.
Okay, so we can use the current CDA import. It's just we'll get an incomplete that we have to manually go in and adjust.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
And just to clarify, because I noticed we left the ETC on there for et cetera, it really is the IRF and the IPF that you're subtracting. And the reason that we're doing this is because CMS wants proof of validation on this reporting that shows that the facility knows the entire count from all of their units that they would map, and that knows that from the acute care report specifically, that the IRF and the IPF that have separate CCNs and separate reporting requirements would be taken out of acute care so that acute care is not being double counted. And so we have in Lab ID the ability for those units, IRF and IPF, to identify themselves as CMS, IRFs, and IPFs and to put in their CCNs. That is how we inside the system know to remove the numerator counts when we're doing the analysis and sending the data to CMS. So removing from your denominator is important, because if they have IRFs and IPFs set up and they say, yes, it's a CMS unit, and they put the CCN in, we know how to remove those numerators, the Lab ID events, from the acute care count. That's why we need you to help take it out of the denominator and the users. That's just a little background on why we had to do that.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the HPRO and KPRO revision and the new question, the prior infection. Is that going to be validated against previous infections on import, or is that just definitional?
Yeah, it's not checking on save. It's not checking for other saved imports, if that's what you're talking about, other saved events.
So you're just saying, you know, I should check that when I have the users send things, but it's not going to be validated on the receiving side.
Right, not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
We have a couple more minutes. Any more questions? Well, thank you, everyone, for joining. We hope these are helpful. As said, we welcome comments and feedback, so send an email to the NHSN mailbox, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you.